Any moment might be our last. Everything is more beautiful because we're doomed. You will never be lovelier than you are now. We will never be here again. How does one achieve immortality when everything eventually meets its end? The ancient Greek word kleos signified glory achieved through deeds so great that the subsequent generations made sure that one's name may never be forgotten. The Trojan War was the most legendary military conflict in history, immortalized by Homer's Iliad, a masterpiece of ancient literature that is studied and widely known by generations to this very day. The names of Achilles, Hector, Odysseus, Agamemnon, Paris, Menelaus, and Helen have all been well remembered for eternity thanks to this iconic war that permanently crippled the Achaean might and power, but also forever destroyed the city of Troy, burned to the ground and never to rise again. There is an everlasting debate among scholars and historians about the exact historicity, chronology, and dating of this legendary war. The conflict, which took place at the end of the 13th and the beginning of the 12th century BCE, had been orally passed through generations for centuries, only to be written down sometime in the 8th century BCE after the development of Greek alphabet. This disparity of about 400 years between the event and the first detailed records about it, as well as the fact that those records are heavily wrapped in the myths where gods are taking active part in the war themselves, makes it very difficult to distinguish myth from history. We will try to separate and exclude the divine interventions of the gods and attempt to rationalize and reconstruct the nature of the conflict from the infamous abduction of Helen all the way to the fall of the impregnable city of Iliad, more famously known as Troy. In the late 13th century BCE, the political order of the Eastern Mediterranean was rapidly changing. Significant migrations were taking place and a new style of warfare was developing based on mass usage and production of cheap but quality weapons made of iron. This enabled many remote and warlike peoples to disrupt the world order. Some of them would form confederations, such as the Sea Peoples which ravaged Mediterranean coast and even attacked the great pharaohs of Egypt. The Hittite Empire lost vast territories to the Assyrians and was brought to its knees by the invading Kaskas and Phrygians. The Mycenaean Greece saw the Achaean power greatly diminished, being engaged in constant warfare between the rulers but also with the invading tribes from the north, with its coastal territory vulnerable to the attacks from the sea. In this environment, it was hard to maintain prosperity as the traditional trade routes were hardly available and the danger of invasions from almost every direction was higher than ever. However, the situation in the northwestern part of Anatolia was not all that bad. The city of Troy, a long-time trading hub, managed to maintain stability and keep control of the trade between the Black Sea and Mediterranean. This wealthy coastal city managed to prosper while everybody else fell into disarray, and the legend of the rich and luxurious Trojans quickly spread throughout the known world. In Greece, The constant internal warfare had greatly damaged the Mycenaean hegemony. Invasions from the north caused great damage and instability but were repulsed for a time, and it took no less than a very strong ruler to bring everything back together. Agamemnon, the successor of Atreus, emerged victorious in a battle for the Mycenaean throne and quickly established himself as the most ambitious and the most powerful king in all of Greece. His brother Menelaus was installed as the Basileus of Sparta, and it did not take long for the rest of the local kings across Greece to recognize Agamemnon as the supreme ruler, the Wanax of the Achaeans. Those who did not voluntarily submit were conquered by force, and the loose confederation of the Mycenaean palaces was now stable under a powerful king, eager to go even further and look beyond the traditional borders of the Achaean warlords. The city of Troy was ruled by King Priam, an aging ruler that saw his city prosper to unimaginable heights. It was said that the Trojans were so rich that they craved gold into their walls, which were so big that the city could never be conquered. His son and designated successor, Hector, was a reputed warrior, considered to be the greatest hero among the Trojans, famed for his campaigns throughout the Anatolia. Among the youngest of King Priam's many children was Alexander, better known as Paris, a handsome prince that grew into an important Trojan diplomat. Trojans and Achaeans were trading partners, and a number of treaties ensured Troy that Achaeans would not be their enemy. Agamemnon, however, looked at the wealthy Anatolian city with envy and never-ending ambition. He was recognized as the king of men, just as Zeus was the king of gods. Even the invincible city of Troy must bow down to the high king of all of Achaea. What Agamemnon did not know was that the young Prince Paris would soon enough give him the reason he wanted to attack and conquer the wealthy trading partner. A Trojan diplomatic mission was dispatched to the Mycenaean palace of Sparta, where Paris was welcomed as a respected guest. There, Paris met with King Menelaus, brother of Agamemnon, and his wife Helen. Helen was a daughter of Tyndareus, the previous ruler of Sparta, who left the throne in favor of Menelaus. Helen was considered to be the most beautiful woman in the world, and before her wedding with Menelaus, all her former suitors, which happened to be many of the princes and rulers across Greece, were made to swear an oath of loyalty to Menelaus and therefore to Agamemnon. The beautiful Helen would not escape the eye of the young Trojan prince, and what Paris was about to do would bring a terrible fate to everyone involved and trigger the deadliest conflict of its time. At night, before sailing home, Paris abducted the queen of Sparta, and Helen was on a Trojan ship sailing for Troy. This event came as a shock to both the Achaeans and Trojans. Paris's countrymen were in disbelief, knowing that they would never escape the consequences. The Achaeans were enraged, and Menelaus could not believe that a prince which he received as a guest in his own palace would go on and abduct his wife, whose hand he had won against the many suitors across all of Greece. Agamemnon, the most powerful Achaean king, saw it as grave disrespect to his people, something that could never go unpunished. On the other side, he just got the reason he was looking for in order to gather all of the Greeks for his plan of grand conquest. However, not everybody in Greece was looking for a war, especially since the past decades were anything but peaceful. Although Agamemnon had already begun his war preparations, a diplomatic mission consisting of Menelaus and Odysseus was sent to Troy in order to return Helen home by peaceful means. The proposed terms were unknown other than the request that Trojans immediately surrender Helen back to the Achaean ambassadors. The request was ultimately turned down, and Menelaus and Odysseus returned home empty-handed. It was clear at this point that the conflict could not be avoided. A gathering of the Achaean leaders in the Boeotian port city of Aulis was summoned in order to start the war as soon as possible. Odysseus, the king of Ithaca and Agamemnon's trusted ally, had just had his son born and wasn't as enthusiastic about the war as he once were. One story has it that he attempted to fake insanity in order to avoid being called for the campaign, but that was quickly discovered and exposed by the Achaean prince Palamedes. In other accounts, Odysseus was in favor of war from the beginning. Either way, Odysseus was among the most prominent Achaean leaders and had traveled across Greece together with Nestor, the king of Pylos, in order to recruit forces and gather the Achaean princes for Agamemnon's cause. Various significant rulers were assembled together with their armies, such as Idomeneus of Crete, who was second in charge after Agamemnon, and Thersander, the leader of the Boeotians and one of the former Argive Epigoni that conquered Thebes decades before. As the Achaean forces were assembled in Aulis in Boeotia, the last warlord to arrive was young Achilles, prince of Phthia and Greece's greatest hero, unmatched on the field of battle. Achilles was a son of Peleus, king of Phthia, and Thetis, traditionally portrayed as a sea nymph or a goddess. Before joining up with the Achaean forces, young Achilles was presented a prophecy in which he was given a choice of a long and happy life if he decided to stay home. But if he decided to go to the Trojan War, his name was to be remembered forever, passed from generation to generation, covered in fame and glory. But that path would not go without a price. If he was to go to Troy, he would never return home, and his fate would be sealed, and his death certain and imminent. Achilles' choice represents the prime example of the ancient Greek kleos, the ultimate glory, even if it comes with a price of one's own life. Upon Achilles' arrival at Aulis, an Argive seer named Calchas was brought to observe the sacrifices made to the gods in order to gain divine favor for the Achaean army. Following a sacrifice to god Apollo, Calchas' interpretation was that Troy would fall in the 10th year of the war. Despite hearing that the conflict would last for the full 10 years, Agamemnon was still eager to take Troy as quickly as possible. The Achaean fleet was rushed to sail towards Hellespont, despite winds being heavy and weather not being suitable for sea voyages. The Achaean expedition, led by Achilles and Thersander, was immediately dispatched in order to catch Trojans and their allies unprepared. However, the Achaeans were not able to land at Troy and proceeded further until they were eventually able to unload at the coast of Mycenaean. Mycenaean was ruled by King Telephus, one of the Trojan allies, who immediately ordered an attack on the unloading Achaeans. In the following battle, the unprepared Achaean forces were routed, and Thersander, the Basileus of Thebes, was killed. Achilles' forces managed to fight back, and the king Telephus himself was seriously wounded. After a stalemate and heavy losses on both sides, the Achaeans managed to drive the Mycenaeans back from the coast, giving them time to consider their options. The rest of the Achaean fleet was yet to arrive, and it was decided that it would be the best to sail back and reunite instead of being heavily outnumbered in the foreign lands. Things would quickly go from bad to worse for the Achaeans, as their fleet was scattered by a heavy storm, rendering any attack on Troy impossible. Upon learning that there would be no reinforcements, Achilles decided to sail back to Greece despite the catastrophic weather. He was forced to first land on the island of Skyros and then continue back to the mainland once the weather has calmed. This failed expedition was interpreted by the prophet Calchas as a divine intervention, as the Achaeans wanted to wage war prematurely, defying the will of the gods. Eventually, another gathering was scheduled at Aulis, but this time everything had to be done right. There would be no rushing, no quick expeditions or campaigns, but a grand war while the will of the gods would not be defied. Not only all the sacrifices were properly conducted, but in order to appease the gods and regain their favor, Agamemnon went so far that he demonstrated willingness to do the unthinkable. Please consider subscribing and sharing the video, as this is a one-person production and it greatly helps the visibility of the channel. Special thanks to History with Sai, Nico, Panayotis Yiannopoulos, Fred Lecky, and Estate Care for their continuous support. If you wish to become a Patreon member, please click the link in the video description. This was WanaxTV, and we'll see you again soon.